Welcome everybody to the Top Rated Seller webinar series. We're so glad you've joined us today. We have an important topic for all e-commerce sellers. We're going to be talking about sales tax tips for e-commerce sellers. We are honored to have this presented by Mark Faggiano, the founder and CEO of TaxJar.com. Happy to have you with us, Mark.
Hey, thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Housekeeping is always a question. Yes, the webinar is being recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel, and you will get a link to the recording, hopefully the correct link this time in your emails. You can always check the YouTube channel of Top Rated Seller Webinars and find all of our webinars for your viewing pleasure. We will also get a copy of Mark's slides and put those up there with the video as a PDF on the pagemage.com/TRSW site. If you're having audio problems hearing us, the phone is sometimes a little more reliable than your internet connection. So if your computer's giving you trouble, hang up and use the call-in number and the PIN number given to you on the GoToWebinar page and call in. If your phone is giving you trouble, sometimes simply hanging up and calling back in will fix that issue. Stay connected to Top Rated Seller Webinars. It's our goal to make your selling easy and profitable. Please stay connected so you can get news of all of our upcoming webinars. You can make sure you're on our newsletter list at pagemage.com/Top Rated Seller Webinars. You can also join our Facebook group. I think we're getting close to 1,300 sellers now. Find us at facebook.com/groups/TRS webinars. If you're a tweeter, as I am, please use the hashtag TRSW when tweeting about the webinars so we can find your tweets. Our sponsors, we are very grateful to our sponsors because without them, we couldn't put on these great information-packed webinars for you at no cost to the attendees. Our first sponsor this week is eBay Radio, where you've got the grift. Check out ebayradio.com. It's live every Tuesday and Thursday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. Our next sponsor is Kabbage. Everybody needs a little cabbage in their business. Kabbage doesn't go just on your credit score. They use your Kabbage score. Check out Kabbage.com to get some cabbage green for your business. Our next sponsor is GoDaddy Online Bookkeeping. You can still find them at the website Outright.com. Put your accounting on autopilot. Maybe we'll be talking about Outright today as we talk about taxes. Outright has some great reports to help you get organized. Terapeak.com is also a sponsor. Have you checked out Terapeak for Amazon? Go to Terapeak.com and get your subscription because Terapeakers make more money. We're also sponsored by PageMage.com and our new tool, Social Beacon. Social Beacon is still in beta. We are getting very close to our launch date. If you'd like to make your social media in one place, if you'd like to find out if your social media is working, if you want more education about how to use social media, you should sign up at socialbeacon.com for their beta test. Get education, monitoring, and analytics from Social Beacon. And last but not least, we are also sponsored by Stamps.com. You can't run a business without shipping, and Stamps.com makes it easy. Stamps.com is the multi-channel shipping tool for eBay sellers, also Amazon, Yahoo, Etsy, and your own website. You can ship it all with Stamps.com. We're also happy you're here. These are our connectors. Myself, Kat Simpson. You can find me at thatcat.com, and Karen Locker from solutionsforecommerce.com. Next, we're ready for Mark to talk to us about Sales Tax Boot Camp for online sellers. Okay, the camp word sounds like fun, Mark, but the boot camp makes it sound like work. So are we going to have to do some work today?
You're not going to have to do any work necessarily, but that name comes from folks that have listened to this presentation before. Said it was a lot like going through a boot camp. So don't let that scare you. It's hopefully going to be informative and you get a lot out of it, and we'll try to have some fun along the way.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I need to give you our legal exemption here, let you know. The information contained in this webinar is good information. It is accurate, it is legal, it is ready to go, but it is general e-commerce and sales tax information. This is not meant to be a specific answer for your individual and business tax questions. For those, you need to see your own accountant or your own lawyer that are licensed licensed in your state. If questions come in today that ask very, very specific personal questions, we cannot answer those. So please, if you have a question, phrase it in a general sense where more than one person will benefit from the answer to that question, and it cannot be construed as giving you personal tax and legal advice. We will be holding all questions for this presentation to the end of the presentation. So please bear with us, and we will get to your questions as soon as we're done. We are compiling them. We won't miss them, and if we do, feel free to remind us in the question box. All right, Mark, I think I've exempted you from legal liability. How are we?
Thanks, Kat. That's definitely helpful, and great introduction. Awesome to be here. Hi to everybody. We'll get started. A lot to go through. This presentation is kind of the result of doing this for a lot of different groups, and it's morphed into what I'll be talking about today. And hopefully you'll all find it helpful and get a lot out of it. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's the quick overview of the agenda. I'll go through the general rules of sales tax. I'll talk about everybody's favorite word when it comes to sales tax, which is Nexus. I'll talk about how much to collect, what it's like to file sales tax returns, and some tips there, everybody's favorite process. I'll give an update on the Marketplace Fairness Act, talk about some ways that I'm here to help, and I'll pass along some resources, and I have a special offer that I know Kat's going to like at the very end. And like Kat mentioned, we'll leave as much time as possible for Q&A at the end. I know a lot of you folks will have questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So really quick about me, we'll get this part over with. All you really need to know about me is I'm a person who's super passionate about solving really complicated problems for small businesses. So I have started, before TaxJar, I've started tax-related companies for small businesses before. Some of you may have heard of FileLater.com. It was a business that I built and sold a few years ago that allowed folks to file tax extensions for both themselves and their businesses. Like I said, when it comes to, I'm really passionate about helping small businesses, but I like the boring, complicated stuff, and I've never seen anything like sales tax before. I think this is probably as boring and as complicated as it gets, and I know that it takes up a lot of time for small businesses, and it's really one of the reasons why I started TaxJar, is to try to take this off of your plate so you can do what's most important, and that's things like sourcing and trying to grow your business so you can make more money. Like Kat mentioned, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax professional, I'm just someone who's invested literally thousands of hours into this, doing my homework, doing the research, and the goal of this, I'm just trying to pass on as much of it as I can in an hour. And hopefully you can walk away feeling like you know a little bit more about sales tax than you did before it started. So let's talk about the general rules of sales tax. The first one is my lame attempt at humor, but with 45 states who collect sales tax, there are essentially 45 different sets of laws, and that means that there are too many rules. So this stuff is complicated, it's confusing. In general, in-state sales, so if I'm in California, if I sell to somebody and ship that item to someone else in California, I'm required to collect sales tax and then remit it along to the state. Out-of-state sales, so I'm in California, if I sell to somebody in Arizona, I'm not responsible for collecting sales tax on that transaction, at least not yet anyway, and I'll talk about how that may change. How much I collect depends on a lot of different factors, which I'll cover. A lot of it based on where I'm based as the seller and where the buyer is located. The filing deadlines in each state are in general tied to volume of sales. So the logic from the state's perspective makes a lot of sense, right? What they say is the more sales tax you collect, the faster we want you to pay. Folks who are doing higher amounts of revenue and are collecting more sales tax usually are paying monthly. And then if you're not collecting as much sales tax, the state may say you can just pay us quarterly or semi-annually or even annually. Some states have discounts for paying them early. So, and I actually include a link to a page on our blog later in the presentation that lists those states. Generally, it's, you know, if you just pay on time, you can keep 1% or 2%. So they're essentially rewarding you for complying. They're so happy just to have you comply that they're willing to give you some of the money that you owe back. And what we tell folks is absolutely 100% take them up on that. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away, essentially. And of course, all states have penalties for paying late. So if you don't pay on time, that usually triggers some combination of a penalty for not paying and filing, as well as interest being accumulated on what you should have paid to the state. One of the things we've learned is that it's really important to save as much data about your business and about all the transactions that you're doing as possible. And the reason being, and we've heard this over and over again anecdotally from our customers and from others, is that a sales tax audit is basically makes an income tax audit look like a birthday party. So it is very time-consuming, very complicated, very stressful, and at the end of the day, very expensive. So the more prepared you can be for, God forbid, an audit that comes up, the better off and the quicker it'll go. So the states do actually do a pretty good job of detailing exactly what you need to retain and for how long. So I highly recommend checking out your state website and verifying what exactly you're on the hook for in terms of data. We've actually detailed all of that too on the TaxJar website. So what's it like to be selling online in 2013, pretty much at 2014 now? These days, everybody is, that we talk to anyway, is multi-channel, right? So multi-channel means that you're selling inventory on more than one platform. So if we were given this presentation maybe even just 3 or 4 years ago, folks, you know, it was pretty common to hear, well, I'm just a Etsy seller, or I'm just an eBay seller. Now everybody we talk to, yeah, I'm doing some combination of selling some things on eBay, I'm also an Amazon seller, I'm experimenting on this site or another, I also have my own website, and I'm going to craft fairs on the weekend and selling there as well. And the reason being why more folks are multi-channel is because it's just easier, right? There's really no cost for you to get set up on a new channel other than the learning curve of trying to figure out if what you sell, if it sells there, you know, and if you can make a profit there. In general, some platforms do help you collect sales tax. None of them help you actually file sales tax returns to the state or pay what you owe. And a lot of the folks that we talk to, sales tax is being collected in different accounts. So if you are this multi-channel seller, you're collecting sales tax through PayPal because you're on eBay. You are doing sales on Etsy and collecting sales tax through their payment system, through Amazon using Amazon's tax collection service. So you've got all these different amounts that you've collected, but they're everywhere, right? They're not all centralized in one place. So that's pretty common that we hear from multi-channel sellers. And most importantly, and sadly enough, is really you're on your own when it comes to sales tax. So the states are not doing a good job at all about trying to educate you about what your responsibilities are. Unfortunately, folks that hear from the state, it's usually because it's too late and they've, you know, haven't complied correctly. So, and sadly, the platforms that you're selling on don't do a great job either. So we hear over and over and over again from Amazon sellers that Amazon really doesn't do anything other than enable tax collection, but they're not really doing any educating. So that makes it tough. Not only are the laws tough to comprehend, but you're kind of on your own out there. And that, again, that's another reason why we started TaxJar, to try to alleviate some of that. So let's talk about Nexus, when you're actually supposed to collect sales tax. Nexus is kind of a fancy word that essentially means this, what I've got on the screen there, that your business has a presence in a state that's significant enough that you're required to comply with state sales tax law. So what does that mean, to comply? Well, it means you need to register your business with the state, collect sales tax on items that are shipped to folks in that state, and then pay what you've collected on to the state Department of Revenue. So one really important distinction here is that you're not paying sales tax technically out of your pocket, right? You should be just collecting it and then passing on whatever you've collected onto the state. Now, I understand that for some folks that's easier said than done. We hear lots of sellers say, well, I've actually gone out and bought inventory with the sales tax collected, and then I need to scramble around to get the cash to be able to make my sales tax payments. But really the way it should work is that you're just passing along what you've collected. In the states, one quick story is the states actually consider you to be what they call collection agents. So if you think about it, as an online seller, the states have no way to collect sales tax on a particular transaction. So they're relying on you to do that for them. The real unfortunate and tragic part of this is that they don't make it easy as it should be, right? In fact, they make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. But they're really relying on you to do the dirty work for them, which is figure out the laws, figure out when you're supposed to collect, how much to collect, and then once you collect, to pay it in a timely manner. Now, one interesting note here is that third-party fulfillment, and I'm looking at FBA sellers here, gives your entire business nexus. So what does that mean? That means that if you are selling on eBay and you're also selling on Amazon and you're an FBA seller, if FBA gives your business nexus in a particular state, it actually gives the eBay business side of the business nexus as well. So that means, just a quick example, if the warehouse in Arizona, let's say you're in California, which is where I'm based, the warehouse in Arizona, the FBA warehouse, gives your business nexus in Arizona. It also gives your eBay business. So the eBay, you should be collecting sales tax on eBay transactions to sales in Arizona as well. And I'll go through some more detailed examples of this in a bit. And it's kind of obvious, right? But if you don't have nexus in a state, that means you don't have to collect sales tax. You don't have to comply. You don't have to register. You don't have to do all those things. Hopefully that's clear. Here are the two most common nexus types we see with e-commerce sellers. The first is home or office nexus. So this is where you live, and in a lot of cases, is also where you live is where you operate your business, right? You've got inventory stored in your garage or in the dining room or down in the basement, right? So the example here is if you lived in San Jose, California and sell out of your house, then you have nexus in California, and you're responsible to collect sales tax on all transactions that are shipped to California addresses. And that one point to bring on here is if you're thinking about complying for sales tax, my recommendation is that you should be compliant within your home state at the very least, okay? And the reason being is because your home state is much more likely to notice that you are generating revenue and collecting sales tax or not collecting sales tax than, you know, a remote state. But if you're thinking about getting involved in this, that's where I would start. I would make sure that everything's buttoned up with the particular state that you live in and or operate your business out of. Inventory nexus is the most common one, another one of the most common ones, especially for FBA sellers and anybody that's using a third-party fulfillment service. So if you have inventory in an FBA warehouse, all of the states that have FBA warehouses consider that to be nexus. So the example would be you live in San Jose and you have inventory in an FBA warehouse in Pennsylvania. Well, that means you need to collect sales tax on transactions being shipped to California and Pennsylvania. Okay, now this could be a shocker for some FBAers that are listening to this. Unfortunately, Amazon does not make this in any way, shape, or form clear when you sign up for FBA, but this is the reality. and I'll talk more about this in a second. Actually faster than I thought. So every FBA state says that your inventory counts as Nexus. We've done the research. We've talked to all the states. There are 15 of them right now. And again, what this means is that if you're an FBA seller, what you're supposed to do is register with any of the states that you have inventory in, collect sales tax in those states, and then pay what you collect to the state. Now, without going too far off this slide, what makes it super challenging is that Amazon does not do a good job of telling you, or make it simple in terms of telling you where your inventory is stored at any particular point. Folks commonly ask me the question of, well, what if my inventory is in a state for a day? Does that count as Nexus? And the response is, technically, yes. The states will say they don't care if it's a day or if it's a year. But one of the points I want to make today is that really all of these decisions about how much to comply is up to you. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what you absolutely have to do. I'll only make recommendations, but just so you know what the law says, the states in that particular case will say that you still need to comply with us. So, and sorry for folks that are not FBA sellers, but just want to pass on some more information just real quickly about what are the states that have FBA warehouses. So we put together this map, and there, like I said, there are 15 of them, and there will be more in 2014 and beyond. So what Amazon is doing, right, is they're trying to get to same-day shipping, essentially. So they are building as many of these things as they can, and it's allowing them, these are incredible logistics machines, and they're, for any of you who are, FBAers understand how it works, but like I said, there are these implications sales tax-wise that come along with this. As Kat mentioned, we're going to be publishing these slides, so don't feel like you have to write these down or anything right now, but just so you know. So let's talk about collecting sales tax. The most common question is, how much am I supposed to collect? So at a really high level, the tax rate that's collected is usually actually a sum of a few different parts. It's the state rate plus potentially a local rate. So that could be like a city or a county rate. And then in some cases, special tax rates. So I'm thinking about transit taxes, education taxes, those types of things. So when you buy something, you may only see one number, 7 3/4%, but that's actually made up of a lot of different sub rates that are combined into that one rate. Now, there are two basic ways to think about how much to collect. And I'll put them both up on the screen. States usually, again, in general, fall into these two categories. So one is what's called an origin-based state. And this is where the tax rate that you're supposed to collect is based on where your business is located, okay? So the good news here is that you are only required to collect one rate. It's a flat rate for everybody that you're shipping to in your particular state. The bad news is there aren't as many origin-based states as there are what's known as destination-based states. And in a destination-based scenario, the tax rate is based on where the item is being shipped to. So obviously that is a variable tax rate. So there's some calculation that needs to be done to figure out what the tax rate that applies with regards to the address where you're shipping an item. So now fortunately for most of us, if we're using Amazon, for example, or Shopify, that rate is being calculated for you. So you don't have to do the calculation part. There's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to filing, but for the most part, that's taken care of for you. So let's just go through some examples. Let's start off with an origin-based example. So Texas is an origin-based state. In this case, the seller is located in Irving, Texas, and the buyer person buying an item off of the seller is in Archer City, Texas. Because this is an origin-based state, the sales tax rate that's collected on this transaction is based on where the where the seller is located. So the tax rates that apply in Irving, where the seller is located, is 8.25%. But that's, as you can see, that's a sum of all these different subrates. So the state rate plus the County of Irving rate, and then there's this mass transit tax, all adding up to 8.25%. So for this seller in Irving, he or she is charging that 8.25% to everybody in Texas. Now, in a destination-based scenario, the seller is in Stamford, New York. New York's a destination-based state. The buyer is in Buffalo, New York. So how you calculate the sales tax really depends on what the rates that are in effect in Buffalo. Okay, so take a look. It's the state rate and then the Erie County, which is where Buffalo is. Those two rates apply. So in this scenario, the correct rate to collect would be 8.75%. So the guy in New York, the seller in New York, again, it's a variable rate being charged, whereas the seller in Dallas or in Irving, in the previous example, is charging a flat rate for everybody in Texas. So that's basically at a high level, that's how to think about how to categorize states and collecting sales tax if you're thinking about complying in states other than your own. So just real quick about specifically collecting on Amazon and eBay. Collecting on Amazon, look, Amazon provides a great service in terms of doing the collection. The downside is that it's really on you as the seller to get the settings right. So they don't really do a good job. In fact, I'll say it's a terrible job in telling you how you should actually fill out the settings, right? They're very hands-off about it. It's on you. And one of the things that we're trying to do is educate folks so that they feel confident that they're collecting correctly. By the way, you have to have a pro account on Amazon to be able to use the tax collection service. So one way that you could actually get your settings wrong is if you're collecting only the state rate in a destination-based state. So let's go back and think about that New York example, right? So if you only check the box for the state rate, you actually weren't collecting the entire sales tax rate that you were supposed to. You would have been omitting the Erie County rate, and so technically you would be collecting sales tax wrong. So that's why it's important to be as educated as possible for each of these states to know how to set up your settings in Amazon correctly. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we're helping folks do that. On eBay, eBay's got its own unique challenge. Now, unfortunately, eBay does not, no matter whether a state is origin or destination, you're only able to collect at one rate. And I hear this from eBay sellers time and time again how frustrating this is. So essentially, eBay does not allow you to collect sales tax correctly in destination-based states. It's just literally not possible. So here are the two most common scenarios we see and when we talk to eBay sellers. Some collect at the state rate for everyone. So they say, you know what, I'm just going to take out any local rates that apply, and I'm just going to collect the state rate. And in scenarios where I miss collecting the local rate that I should have, I'm going to pay that out of pocket, which kind of stinks, right? Nobody really wants to do that. We've heard some folks say that there may be a competitive advantage, right? So let's say just for round numbers, I'm collecting at 5% because I'm only collecting at the state rate, and my competitor is selling the exact same thing, is actually collecting maybe correctly at 6.5%. Well, we've heard anecdotally that it may be some kind of competitive advantage to be only charging the 5%. Really what we hear from tax professionals is that they say to collect at the highest rate for everyone. So if you're only allowed to collect at one rate for an entire state, find out what the highest rate is and collect at that rate. The gotcha here is to make sure that you pay whatever you collect, because it's actually illegal to collect sales tax and then only remit part of that to the state. So if you collect $100, make sure that you pay the state $100. But that's a very common scenario, and again, we've heard accountants and tax pros recommend that that's the way that eBay sellers should be collecting. When it comes to filing sales tax returns, you're required to combine and file a single return per state. So one of the most often asked questions that we get is, okay, I'm an eBay seller and I'm an Amazon seller. Does that mean I need to file 2 sales tax returns to the state of California, for example? And the answer is no. So at the end of the day, the state doesn't really care where the money's coming from. They don't care that you're selling on 5 different channels. They want to see you package that all up nicely and remit 1 return. Here's that link that I mentioned earlier about the states that offer discounts for paying on time. So don't feel like you have to scribble that down right now. Again, the slides will be distributed later. A really important thing is to make sure that you file what are called 0 returns. So one of the very common issues that we see is that a seller will have Nexus in a particular state, they'll register in the state and they'll collect sales tax, and then let's say they're a quarterly filer, and for whatever reason in that particular state over that quarter they don't do 1 sale. So they haven't collected a penny in sales tax. So what they do is they don't do anything. They don't file at least a 0 return, and that's actually in a lot of states that's not what they want to see. So even if you don't collect 1 penny, you need to file a return saying essentially, hey, look, I didn't collect even 1 penny, and you're putting 0 in the amount of sales tax collected field, which is why they're called 0 returns. Some states will even penalize you for not filing 0 returns. So the important thing to keep in mind here is that if you make the decision to comply in a state, make sure that you file something, even if you're not, if sales are low or you take some time off. Once you're registered, you're on the hook to comply. So make sure that you get into a habit of filing returns no matter what. Filing in a destination-based state is a pain. Let's just be honest about it. And the reason why is that the states want you to calculate sales and sales tax collected by jurisdiction. And if you think about it, the logic is, let's say you're filing to New York and you've collected $100 in sales tax. If you write the state of New York a check for $100, they don't have any idea how to distribute that $100 throughout all of the dozens and dozens of cities and counties and special taxes that exist. So essentially what the state is doing is relying on you to divide all that up for them and doing that on a sales tax return, so that when they get the return from you, they say, oh, okay, here's Kat Simpson's $100. She says that she made all these sales to these different counties. Now we know who to go distribute the money to. That's a lot of work to do that. And again, that's one of the reasons why we started TaxJar, because to have to manually figure out how your sales are distributed, Kansas has over 800 jurisdictions. That's a lot. So that's a lot of manual work that needs to be done. And this gets worse if you're multi-channel, right? Because you have one spreadsheet for Etsy. You have one spreadsheet for Amazon. You have another one for eBay. And at some point you're going to need to combine all those and sort them out by state and figure out which sales apply to the states that you're compliant in. So here's a screenshot of Ohio's e-file process, essentially. And I apologize, it's not the greatest, but it gets the point across that Ohio has, I believe, 88 jurisdictions, and it's 88 counties, essentially. So here's a very small part of those 88 counties. And here's what they're asking you to do, exactly what I was just talking about, which is they have these two columns where they're wanting you to distribute that sales tax collected in those two columns for the 88 jurisdictions. Now, obviously, if you didn't collect sales tax in Belmont County, you don't have to put anything there. But again, they're wanting you to tell them where to send the money once you sent it to them. So hopefully that part makes sense. The bottom line is that it's very time consuming and it's a pain in the butt. Okay, so moving right along, I know we're going fast. I'm trying to cover a lot in a short amount of time. But this is one of the topics that folks really want to know about, because there's, depending on the news cycle, there's lots of stuff out there about the Internet Sales Tax Law, otherwise known as the Marketplace Fairness Act. So let's talk about what the status of the law is. This is actually federal legislation. Okay, it's not state legislation. It's federal legislation that will affect state sales tax compliance. It passed very quickly in the Senate this past spring, which was a surprise to a lot of experts, but it got through really without very little debate. So it's currently stalled in the House. I've had this slide basically the exact same for the last, I don't know, 5 months maybe. And it's just sitting there. Now, the good news, if you don't want this law to pass, right, is that every time you know, a scandal or other issue comes up, this gets pushed down on the ladder of importance. So it's not obviously the top thing that's being debated right now. In fact, it's really not even being debated. It's just kind of sitting there. But the fact that it did pass in the Senate is really significant, because this has, some iteration of this bill has been in front of Congress for I think it's the better part of 5 years now, maybe even longer, but it's never even gotten this far before. So the current rumor, if you will, is that there's a good chance that the Marketplace Fairness Act will get tacked on to a larger bill, like the finance bill, for example. So Congress, in its infinite wisdom, has a way of you know, passing bills within bills. So we were just talking to someone who spent a lot of time working with one of the states, and he said he would not be surprised if he just woke up one day and the Marketplace Fairness Act had been passed overnight as tacked on to a larger bill. That's the rumor. Does that mean that's actually going to become true? No, but I'm just passing along to you what I've been hearing. So if legislation passed today, so you're probably saying, well, who cares? Well, here's why you may potentially care. If it passed today, the current Nexus relationships that you have set up will remain. So one of the biggest misnomers about this is that, let's say you're complying in 3 states. Well, if this bill passes, you're still complying in those 3 states. Your slate is not wiped clean. That's a very common misconception. Now, the term remote sales is what really applies to this particular bill. So if this bill passes, remote sales will equal Nexus, which will mean that you'll need to comply. And let me explain a little bit more what that means. So a remote sale is, again, I'm based in California. Anything that I ship and sell out of state is considered to be, right now, is considered to be a remote sale. Now, again, let's go back to the scenario where I am compliant in 3 states, and let's say those states are Washington, California, and Arizona. Okay, that means that sales to those states are not remote, right? Because I have Nexus to those states, I'm being compliant in the state. If I sell something to Texas in that scenario, that is considered to be a remote sale. Okay, now anybody that has sales to remote states in excess of $1 million will need to comply. If you have sales to remote states under $1 million, you'll be exempt from this bill. Now, that may even change to 10 million, depending on who you talk to, and that's what eBay is actually fighting for, is to change that number. But let me say that again. If your remote sales are less than $1 million in the previous calendar year, as the bill is written today, and if it got passed today, you would not have to comply with this bill. You would still have to comply with whatever Nexus relationships you have set up, okay? And if your remote sales are over $1 million, then you would have to comply. And again, what this says, this bill says, is that if you're over $1 million, every single item that you ship remotely needs to have sales tax collected to it. So it doesn't matter. Let's say the scenario is, again, the person with 3 states of Nexus, and let's say they're generating over $1 million in remote sales. They don't even have inventory in Massachusetts, for example. If this bill passed, they would have to collect sales tax in Massachusetts. So Nexus is essentially out the door at that point for that particular seller. Again, somebody with over $1 million in remote sales. So that means that particular seller would have to comply in every state, not just states that they have Nexus in. So hopefully that's clear. Happy to answer questions on it. So let me just give you another quick, this is a really interesting existing Nexus example. Let's say the seller is based in Washington State. And let's just say, just for simplicity purposes, their annual remote sales is $1.5 million, okay? And it splits out this way, $900K to Nevada and $600K to California. Now, I know this may not be realistic that they only have sales to 2 states remotely, but let's just bear with me to get the example across. Let's say the seller, and this is pre-Marketplace Fairness Act, this is right now. If the seller registers in the state of Nevada, okay, their remote sales are actually $600K now. So they would be under the $1 million exemption. Okay, so there's actually a benefit to complying. If you're a seller that's kind of teetering on this $1 million remote sales level and you're not complying, here's a reason why you may want to. Because it may save you a few dollars and you may not have to comply. So the last thing is that, and this comes from countless conversations with tax professionals and folks that work actually with the states, and they all say that, look, trying to comply with sales tax law is a lot better than knowingly not complying. The reality is, folks, that the states are happy, tickled to death that you're actually complying with them, right? So for that reason, they're actually a lot less concerned with you being perfect on how much you're collecting and how much you're remitting to the state. Now, that's not to say if you're collecting $1,000 and only remitting $100, they're not going to be happy. But the typical example is you collected $99 in sales tax this quarter for California, and according to the law, you probably should have collected $114. The state's not going to care about that, right? They'd rather have you complying and be 80% accurate than knowingly kind of burying your head in the sand and not playing along. Those are the folks that they're actually looking for, and those are the folks that they're more apt to, quote unquote, go after. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about how much do you want to really get into sales tax compliance. So TaxJar, I'm going to talk about that real quick. We are here to help. So all this stuff that I've been talking about and all the complexities, that's why we founded the company. Okay? We're trying to make this easier. We're trying to take this off your plate. So what we do is we automatically pull and organize your sales and tax data from your Amazon and eBay and actually Shopify accounts. I should have put those in there as well. And then we create daily reports, so these run automatically overnight, that are subtotaled to local jurisdictions. So when I mentioned in a destination-based state example, for example, they want you to do all that manual labor in terms of subtotaling out. We do that automatically for you. So we completely eliminate hours and hours and hours of work on a per filing basis. And what we're doing now is we're customizing that. So what New York wants is different than what North Carolina wants, is different than what Texas wants. We're getting at those reports so dialed in that they're exactly what the states want, to the point all you got to do is cut and paste from your TaxJar report into the state e-filing system, or if you're filing by paper, just copy it and write it on the paper. We've also, at the request, one of the things that we found out is that accountants started using TaxJar. So we've built what we call a pro channel. So if you've got an accountant that's doing this for you, they're absolutely going to love TaxJar. So make sure you tell them about it. Tell them that you can sign up for the pro channel. And again, it does the exact same thing essentially. So it saves them the time of having to manually go out and figure out how to distribute sales amongst jurisdictions. Here's a screenshot of our dashboard. This would be the first thing that you see when you log into TaxJar. In this particular case, this customer is complying in both Missouri and California. It gives them a very clear understanding of when the next time they need to file is, and shows how much they've collected to date. And then if they click on a particular state, this is what we call internally call local reports. So this is the breakdown. Remember I showed you the screenshot of those 88 jurisdictions in Ohio. This is the report that we show that coincides with that. So you can pick whatever date range that you want, and then this shows, for this particular example, how the sales broke down by county. So this is, for somebody in Ohio, this is awesome, because all they got to do is come check out this report, copy the data into their e-file, and they're done. So what used to take maybe 5 hours now takes 10 or 15 minutes. TaxJar, quite obviously, hopefully, is located at taxjar.com. We offer a 30-day free trial. There's no credit card required for signing up for an account with us. We offer both monthly and annual subscriptions that are based on transaction volume. So TaxJar is only $10 a month if you're doing 1,000 transactions a month or below. And those transactions include sales with and without sales tax being collected. If you sign up for an annual subscription, you essentially get a couple of months extra for free if you pay all up front. So here's an offer I'm going to throw out there for everybody listening. Here's a way to get an additional 1 month of TaxJar for free. So you can get up to, instead of a 30-day free trial, a 60-day free trial. If you sign up by this Friday, Friday the 13th, if you sign up for an account and email me, I'll give you instantly an extra 15 days. If you do that and either tweet, I just signed up for @TaxJar, or like TaxJar on Facebook, I'll give you another 15 days automatically. So this is an extra 30 days. You'll get 60 days before you even have to put in your credit card to try out TaxJar fully. And the reason why this could be great for you is because January is coming up. That's a quarterly and annual deadline month for a lot of people. So if you're a quarterly filer or you only pay once a year, January is a really important month for you. So TaxJar would cover that for you. You wouldn't have to pay a dime. So I encourage you to take us up on the offer.
You knew I'd like that. I love free stuff.
Yeah, that was for you, Kat, actually.
I knew it. You guys, TaxJar has made a huge difference in sales tax filing for me. It's now a 1 Excedrin day versus a 4 Excedrin day. Does that help, Charlene? Charlene's our Excedrin girl. All right, we have tons of questions, Mark. Did you have anything you want to put out there last before we dive into questions?
Just real quick, these resources that we've put together, and this first one with your help, Kat, we put together a group on Facebook. All you have to do is go to salestaxcommunity.com. It'll forward to our Facebook group. This is a super valuable group because sellers can get together and talk about sales tax related issues. I know there are tons of really, really valuable Facebook groups about selling. This is the only one dedicated to sales tax stuff. Yep. We've also put together for FBA sellers FBAsalestax.com, which features a free ebook. All you got to do is give your email address. You'll get it sent to you right away. And this goes through step by step in really good detail about how to set up tax collection on Amazon if you're an FBA seller.
Those are great resources, and I love that they're free. I really appreciate that because I know a lot of hours, weeks and thousands of hours went into those. I loved what you said. You weren't a CPA, but you had spent thousands of hours, and you know the definition of expert is 10,000 hours. So I think you definitely qualify as an expert.
Yeah, thanks.
10,000 hours or more.
And we know you love the free stuff, Kat, especially the resources.
I do. I love education. Well, we're at Top Rated Seller Webinars. That's what it's all about, free education. So I got a few questions from a group, and then Karen has some. So let's just dive in. Mike has a good question, Michael, about items that cost of goods. So it's more about accounting than taxes, but we'll see if you have any ideas on this. How do I treat cost of goods on something that I take from my personal collection? So I've had something for 5 years. I paid $10 for it 5 years ago. I've enjoyed it. It's been sitting on my shelf, and I decide to sell it. How do I do cost of goods? And again, that's an accounting question, not taxes.
Yeah, that's completely out of my domain. So
Okay.
I would be guessing.
We'll refer that to our
one.
outright people, okay? We have to
I
get
think
our
that's a good idea.
GoDaddy online bookkeeping
GoDaddy.
people on there for that. Yes, okay. All right, Mo wants to know about, since the Supreme Court has now okayed the New York taxes, I'm not sure what they meant by that, but I'm hoping you do, Mike.
The affiliate.
Okay.
The affiliate, that one.
Is there an automatic solution for GoDaddy cart users? I know that TaxJar is integrating in different types of items, Shopify, eBay, Amazon. This person, I guess, Mo, is using the GoDaddy cart and wondering if TaxJar or any other program might integrate with that and help her collect taxes.
So I don't know as much about the GoDaddy cart. If GoDaddy accepts PayPal, is that possible?
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, if it does, then we would integrate, that would count as being integrated with TaxJar, but we don't specifically integrate with that cart yet. If that's important to you, we want to hear it. We're a
Excellent.
completely customer-driven company, and Kat, you can attest to that.
Amen. Yeah.
A lot of what we do is based on what our customers require.
Yeah, I can attest to that very well. Just so you understand, Mo and everyone else, it's very important that you send an email to Mark at TaxJar and say, hey, I have a GoDaddy shopping cart and I would love to have a solution. Because Mark came into the business with TaxJar focusing on eBay sellers with sales tax. And my audience introduced him to the idea of the nightmare that Amazon FBA sellers were getting to, and they've pivoted and have helped cover that niche very, very well, totally in response to customers saying, hey, this is what we need. So TaxJar is very much a customer-driven company. If it's something you need that they don't do now, please don't just say, oh, they don't do it and forget it. Please email them and say, this is what I need. And you may be surprised because there may be a lot of other people that need that. It may be added sooner rather than later to TaxJar. So Mo, please do drop him a line, mark@taxjar.com, mentioning what you need for your GoDaddy shopping cart. Lori says she wants to know because she lives in a state that collects no sales tax on clothing, and she sells pretty much all clothing. That's mostly what she sells. Does she need to worry about sales tax?
So she lives in a state that, well, it sounds like no. If clothing is exempt and she's only selling clothing, then
well,
I don't
here's
know which
the.
state
I
that
think
is, but
it's Massachusetts.
Sounds okay.
It's Massachusetts,
okay.
and here's her issue. She sells mostly clothing, so she probably sells 10 or 15% other items. Then in addition, she's selling on eBay, so she's selling into different states that do tax clothing. So what does that mean for her?
Okay, so two parts. One is that 10 or 15% that is not clothing, then yes, the state of Massachusetts will want her to collect sales tax on those items if they are shipped to addresses in Massachusetts.
Awesome.
Now, if she doesn't have Nexus in any other state, and we talked about some of the common ways that you can have Nexus, then she doesn't have to worry.
Awesome. There you go, Debbie. Yes, you do on the 15 or 10%, and no, you don't on the other states. So that'll be a happy answer for her. Debbie wants to know, she's thinking of using TurboTax this year instead of going to her CPA and paying them. She wants to know if you have any advice on that, how you feel about using TurboTax versus using a CPA.
Again, at this point we're so focused on just trying to do sales tax, we haven't got into, filing income tax returns or business returns or anything like that. So
Understood.
I would not be the most qualified person to answer that question.
That's okay. That's another question. We're compiling questions for Outright too, because according to some of the listeners, what they want they want a webinar on cost of goods. So that might be a mini webinar we can do with our Outright connections. Okay, great. Thank you, Debbie. Ken wants to know, here's his problem, and I think you have heard this before, Mark. We've discussed it. He says, how am I supposed to know where my inventory is in an Amazon warehouse? And for those of you who don't understand Amazon, we actually had a question, what is FBA? FBA is Fulfillment by Amazon. It's where I, as an Amazon seller, send all of my items into the Amazon warehouses, plural, in various states, and then Amazon does the shipping to the customers. It's more or less a fulfillment service. So what Ken is saying is, how is he supposed to know where his items are? And what he means is, even if I ship 3 boxes today, and I ship 1 to California, 1 to Texas, and 1 to Pennsylvania, Amazon can, and usually does, move those items around within their warehouses. They have the right to do that based on the paper that I signed with them. So, if I ship it to California, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay in the California warehouse. So that's the situation with Amazon FBA warehouses. Now, Ken wants to know, what does that mean for Nexus? How am I supposed to know where I have Nexus and where those items are shipping from?
Sure. So Ken's asking a question that we probably get asked multiple times every single day. And it's the right question to be asking. And I wish I had the perfect answer for him. There is no easy way to know.
Amen.
So this is the dilemma that a lot of FBA sellers face. It's, should I just bite the bullet and comply with all of the states? That way I'm covered in case my inventory gets moved around. And Kat, you might be able to speak to this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to cover myself in all those states. Or do I bite off part of this at a time and look at, a lot of my sales are to Pennsylvania, for example. So I'm just going to assume that a lot of those particular sales are coming out of the Pennsylvania warehouse, just assuming that Pennsylvania sales get shipped from Pennsylvania warehouse. It's a really tough thing to try to figure out, and
right.
I can tell you that one of the things that we're working on are some tools that actually help make that decision for you a little bit easier.
Awesome.
But yeah, I wish I could give you an exact order and tell you these are the states you need to comply with and this is how
right.
to do it, but yeah.
Okay, so from here on out, this is Kathy's opinion, Kat Simpson's opinion. This is not Top Rated Seller Webinar's opinion. I don't want anybody else in trouble. This is not TaxJar's opinion. This is Kat's opinion. This is an ethics thing for me. This goes back to what Mark was talking about, doing the best I can. Because the way the law is written, I should only have to pay sales on items that are sitting in a Pennsylvania warehouse and shipped to a Pennsylvania customer. However, the only way I can know that is to go into Amazon every single day and pull a spreadsheet of my 3,000 plus items, and that will tell me where that item is that day. That is way, way too time intensive for me to do. So I practice what I learned as a military wife, which in the military is fondly referred to as CYA, cover your assets. And I go ahead and pay sales tax on every item I ship into Pennsylvania, whether that's an eBay item or whether that's an item Amazon shipped from I don't know which warehouse. And I do that with every single state. I have not yet finished my registration in California, but I'm getting there. That's what I do. That's personally my suggestion. Now, the reason I do it is I want to be as close to the law as I can. I want to CYA. I want to be above question. I don't recommend brand new Amazon sellers do that because it's overwhelming. What I do suggest is you start with your home state. Get registered in your home state, understand what you're doing, and collect, that way. Then the next states that seem to be more, and Mark can speak to this, the states that seem to be more aggressive as far as going after people and saying, you're in our state, we want your money, seems to be Pennsylvania and California right now. So I recommend you get legal in those 2 states. Add the others as you ship inventory into them, as you have time, as you understand and expand. Mark, any comments on that?
No, so that's well said, and we hear that, almost that exact same story a lot. And like the only other thing to add is that, Ken, we're trying to develop some tools
Yes.
and some information to help you make those decisions.
That would be awesome. And I only have one more thing I want to say before we go to the next question. I did make a comment about shipping, whether I shipped an eBay item or an Amazon item. And what I wanted to make sure everyone understood is once you accept that you have Nexus in a different state, for instance, I'm living in Arkansas now, and I'm paying Nexus, for example, in Pennsylvania. I've accepted that my business has Nexus in Pennsylvania. Therefore, if I sell an eBay item to Pennsylvania, I also collect and remit sales tax on that. Because once you accept that you have Nexus in a state, it applies to your entire business. Correct, Mark?
Yep. Well said. Yep.
Just letting you know about that. Okay, last question. Then turn over to our real question person, Karen. Susan said, what if my inventory comes from overseas? Will I be taxed in my state and overseas? Can you speak to that at all?
I actually don't know the answer to that one. If you want to email me, I put up my email address, Mark at TaxJar. Anybody wants to email me, please do that. I'm happy to attempt to look into that for you. I've never been asked that question, so I don't know the answer.
Awesome. Okay, Karen, it's all yours.
And you just kind of covered most of this next question, but I'll ask it again. Do you have a recommendation at what annual FBA sales level small businesses should think about complying in all of the FBA warehouse states, and are there any states targeting small FBA sellers?
Kat covered the second half of that question.
Yep.
I don't have an annual threshold amount that is smart to trigger compliance. I can tell you that we see sellers complying in a dozen states that are making tens of thousands of dollars. They're not huge sellers. So again, it really comes down to personal preference and how much do you actually want to CYA? Do you want to quote unquote take a gamble that a state may come after you or may not come after you, or you just want to put your head on the pillow at night and feel like, I don't even want to worry about that. I'm just going to do the whole thing. And I wish I had a magic dollar amount, but I don't.
I do want to say, Karen, remember we did the webinar with Cliff Enico about, taxes in general, not sales tax, but regular taxes. And Cliff's answer to that question was, how much do I have to sell before I have to worry about paying taxes? And Cliff's answer was 0. As soon as you start selling, in his opinion, his legal opinion, as soon as you start selling items, you are in a business and you need to report that income. So take that for however it applies to this.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because that's one of my other questions. How much do you need to sell on eBay before starting to collect sales tax? If you're running a business, you need to collect sales tax at least in your home state. Would that be about right?
I agree.
And most of the states say you should be collecting on that very first sale.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, I'm blanking on the state. One of them does have a very small threshold that says, look, you don't have to collect on the first $400 in sales or something like that.
Cool.
But most of them say, as soon as you make that first sale, you should be collecting sales tax. And one important thing to note is you're really not supposed to collect sales tax without a license. That's actually illegal to do. So if you're in a situation where you may be complying in a new state, you actually, before you collect sales tax, need to register and get the license first.
And that's the reseller license, correct?
Yeah, it's called different things in different states, but it's actually not the reseller license. It's actually a sales tax.
Okay. See, in Mass, I think it's the reseller. When I get that reseller certificate, I get.
Some of them, in some states, it is the same thing. In other states, it might be two different things, and they're all called different. But basically, what you want to know is, and Kat literally wrote the book on this, is what's that license number that I need to be legally allowed to collect sales tax on a transaction.
Okay. Is California an origin-based or destination-based state?
So it's neither, actually. And usually I talk about this, but I left it out just to try
not
to
confuse
be
things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually what's known as a modified origin state. So we don't make things easy out here, but let me try to explain it as at a high level as I can. So in California, you're actually allowed to collect 2 rates. And the way the state looks at it is that within your jurisdiction, it's origin-based. Okay, so I'm in San Diego. Within my county, I don't have any other local rates that apply, just state and county. If I sell to anybody within the exact same jurisdiction, San Diego County, I charge on an origin-based rate. If I sell to somebody up in San Francisco, I charge based on destination. Okay? So I would charge on the rate that's applicable up in San Francisco. To make it even more confusing, what the state says is on those sales out of my jurisdiction, I don't have to collect local rates. I can elect to collect just the state rate, but that makes it hard for a lot of people because then they're collecting at 2 different rates, and it's just confusing. So what we recommend is, if you have the technology, which most of us do through Amazon or through Shopify, collect at the correct rate. So collect based on the destination for people out of your jurisdiction, and then collect at an origin rate within your jurisdiction. I know that's a lot to take in. Whoever asked that question wants to email me. I'm happy to go through it again.
Okay, and kind of on those lines, are any of the warehouses that Amazon has, any of the states that Amazon has warehouses in, origin states?
Yes.
Because one of the questions we're having is, how do I know what tax rate, if it can be, I have the same item in 3 different warehouses. And if some of them are origin based, then you'd need to tax on from the state it's going from, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, so, right. So
Okay.
one thing that Amazon does do is, if the warehouse is in an origin-based state, it will tax based on where the warehouse is. So you don't have to necessarily worry about what that central location is for your business, right? So if you're in Arizona and you have inventory in an origin-based state, let's say Texas, the sales tax rate that Arizona will charge will be based on where that warehouse is. So they're picking that kind of focal point that they're going to use as the tax rate to charge for sales within that state. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, to make things further complicated, because I'm not sure. So you sell FBA and you sell eBay, and you have Nexus. So if you're shipping something to an origin-based state, but it's your inventory, it's your eBay inventory, how does that work? What tax rate do you charge on eBay?
Okay, so let me make sure that I understand. So you have an eBay business and an Amazon business?
Right, and I have Nexus in, say, Texas.
Okay. Yeah, so what rate do you charge on a sale to Texas?
From eBay, right.
Oh, from eBay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so not to get too complicated, but it may, some states do have a, basically like an out-of-state rate that you can charge.
Okay.
In this case, personally, what I would do is I would charge whatever I'm charging on Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, because that's, as you were talking about the origin versus, because if you have both of those businesses and you're shipping a lot of your stuff yourself, that gets confusing.
Yeah, I would just use, if your Amazon business is charging at, I'm just going to make up a number, 8.25%, I would just do the exact same thing for eBay and just make it simple. And again, that comes back to the kind of the 80-20 rule. Texas is a lot less likely to look at that, if you're charging 8.25% and it should be 7.75%, I'd be shocked if they were going to raise a fuss about that. They're happy to just see you comply, and they know that that's really, really hard to understand and to figure out and how to comply with.
All of this can be. Kat and I were just in a conversation the other day in one of the Facebook groups that was talking about the Supreme Court ruling on the affiliate sales tax. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, and I'm glad you talked about the different things, mix up the Nexus versus marketplace fairness versus that affiliate thing. And they're 3 entirely different things.
Yeah, they really are. And I didn't cover that because it really doesn't apply to our customers and most of the people that I give these webinars to. Most of them aren't affiliates. So if people do have specific questions around that, I'm happy to answer them via email. And up to that point, Karen, the other thing that makes this really complicated is that Amazon itself has its own set of rules. So this is something I probably should have included, but a lot of us see the headlines like, oh, Amazon is going to start collecting in
They're collecting in mass. They're collecting in mass right now.
Okay, so they're collecting in mass. That doesn't mean that you, if you're an FBA seller, need to collect in mass.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling people.
Yeah, it's 2 totally different rules. The only time you as the seller have to worry is if they come in and build a warehouse there.
Right.
An FBA warehouse. So Amazon is playing by its own, literally by its own rules. and it's really important not necessarily to pay attention to those headlines because they can be very confusing and misleading to just the third-party seller.
Yeah, because like here in Massachusetts, they have Nexus because they have R&D and human resources, but that doesn't give eBay's FBA sellers Nexus.
Exactly right. Yep, there's a lot of states that are like that.
Okay. Do you have any tips about working with Amazon sales tax report they started issuing in 2012? I'm a California seller and find them hard to use.
No, because we're basically trying to replace those. So that's the reason why we started TaxJar. So I definitely could not help with that. Other than we make that a lot easier, and I can give lots of examples of customers who have bashed their heads against the wall trying to use those reports, and now are using TaxJar because it's just so much easier. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I have like 5 more questions, then I have one that I actually have myself.
Okay.
If I sign up for TaxJar, does this come with any kind of sales tax audit assistance if a remote state challenges any filings?
It does not. No,
Okay.
At this time it does not.
Does TaxJar assist in configuring a seller's sales tax settings on eBay and Amazon?
Say that one again? Sorry.
One of the people want to know if you help them set up their sales tax settings on eBay and Amazon.
So we don't as a service, but one of the reasons why we wrote that ebook for Amazon was because people kept asking for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to try to guide people as best possible, but it's not a specific service that we offer. If that's important to people, we definitely consider it. And I just want to go back to the previous question, if I can, for 1 second about the audit. That kind of goes back to my point about, contrary to some of the stuff that's out there, the states really aren't looking for you to be absolutely perfect on this stuff. And again, the example that I give is if you've collected $49 and you should have collected $53, then the state is not going to come after you for $4. So our reports are definitely very, very, very accurate and getting more accurate all the time. So that's kind of the explanation why we're trying to get to the point where the state is happy with what you are submitting and is not necessarily going to raise any eyebrows and look to get a couple extra pennies out of you.
Okay. 3 more. I'm selling on eBay and we are located in Miami, Florida. I collect 7% sales tax. How do I set up eBay to collect per county? And I think you kind of talked about that.
Yeah. Yep, so we did. So eBay, it's literally impossible to collect variable tax rates. So, which is unfortunate. So you're only able to collect a fixed tax rate, and you're not able to do, in cases that are destination-based states, you're not able to do what you're required to do. So typically, and I'm just passing this along as an example, most tax professionals and a lot of attorneys that we talk to say, pick the highest rate possible in the state of Florida, for example, and then collect that rate on everybody. That should be the rate that you enter as your fixed rate. And the one caveat to that is to make sure that you remit every single penny that you collect onto the state, because it is illegal to collect and then only remit, a portion of that.
Okay. Now this is the last one. If I pay sales tax on all my items that I sell, am I required to charge my customers for the sales tax?
Yes. Yep. So there's really no distinction between if you go out and you're doing arbitrage and you buy a bunch of stuff at Target and you pay sales tax, you're not using whether or not you use a sales tax exemption license is up to you. But if you go pay sales tax at Target, that doesn't have any effect on if you're throwing that stuff up on eBay or Amazon or anywhere else. Mm-hmm. You still need to collect the sales tax you're required to.
There is a way on some sales tax forms that you can claim that sales tax and get it back, but it's very complicated. Much better not to pay it.
Yeah. And final question before mine, is Michigan an origin state?
Michigan an origin state? I don't think it is. I don't know them all off the top of my head. I can very easily find out. We do have a blog post on TaxJar's blog that talks about origin versus destination. I am almost positive it's a destination-based state.
Yeah, you could look on the blog.
That person could, person could email me. I will forward them the link. It's mark@taxjar.com.
And
Great.
Karen, before you ask your question, there's one thing I did want to get in the recording. Sheila is talking about the news reporting about Amazon starting to collect sales tax, and I want to make sure that we get that on the recording, because when you hear these in the news about Amazon making a deal that they don't have to collect sales tax until 2015, or Amazon's going to start collecting sales tax in January, those deals, and please Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but those deals have nothing to do with third-party sellers. Those are deals
Correct.
that Amazon makes with with that state for the items that Amazon itself sells. Like Amazon has its own products, plus it has products from third-party merchants like myself and Karen. So when it makes a deal with Pennsylvania, it's talking about the stuff that Amazon sells to people in Pennsylvania, not the stuff that Karen and I sell. Is that right, Mark?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to get that in the recording because that's a very common misconception with people.
Yep.
Okay, so now here's my question. I do a lot of listings for FBA sellers, Amazon sellers in general, and I noticed that a lot of times they put just a gen tax as their tax settings.
Yeah.
Is that the best thing to do? I know me, as someone else was asking him in Massachusetts, I'm not going to buy from a seller that is taxing me on clothing that is not taxable in my state.
Yeah. So it really depends on what you're selling, right? So, Massachusetts is a great example. That's one that if you are a clothing seller, then you probably need to go through all of your inventory item by item and assign, individual tax codes. Most sellers that we talk to are selling, things other than clothing, which for the most part are taxable. Clothing is just one of those ones that's just a lot more complicated than, I'll just say kind of generic inventory, like other stuff, right?
Yep.
If you're the way to think about it is, if you are selling inventories, the stuff that you sell is taxable in one state and not necessarily taxable in another, that's where I would get into kind of individual decisions on assigning tax codes within Seller Central. But if you're selling, and I can't think of a really good example right now, which is pretty much taxable everywhere, then I think AGEN tax is more than appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I do that, and then I'm thinking about that when I'm doing it for some people. I'm like, well, this really probably shouldn't be this.
Yeah.
And I discovered that, I was doing it for somebody who was only Massachusetts and ships only from Massachusetts, and she did on the clothing AGEN no tax, which is because there is no tax on those clothing items.
Right.
And I just had something else, and I just went out of my head. So I lost it. But yeah, and I mean, the states are even confusing because, like I said, I'm in Mass, and like grocery items aren't taxable, but convenience grocery foods are.
Yeah, so that's where it gets even. Yeah, that's where it gets even more brutal. Is
ding-dongs
taxability? Yeah, taxability is just a whole other thing that we didn't cover. I'd say for the most part, and for the most part, what folks are selling is universally taxable throughout states. There are, like I said, the Massachusetts clothing is a tremendous example of where you need to really go to that extra level of detail.
Okay, and then there's another issue, though. It's not just clothing and food that's that way. There are books that are non-taxable, religious books in some states. Religious books are non-taxable. If you look through the Amazon tax settings, it'll give you a good idea. I used to recommend AGEN tax on everything, and now I do not recommend that anymore at all. There's too many loopholes, and also states have tax holidays. So clothes may be taxable in 49 states most of the year, but during the tax holidays, a lot of school clothing is not taxable. Office supplies are not taxable, and you'd be surprised what could be considered office supplies. So I think it really makes sense now, unless like you sell only in one category. Like I sell all jewelry and jewelry tools. That would make sense to be gen taxable. But if you sell a smattering in different categories, it really, it makes sense to spend the time to have those items tax coded correctly. You can do that as you list them. Yeah.
That's a better way of getting across what I was trying to say. Thank
Sorry.
you.
I told you I'm good at dumbing it down.
No, that's
but
really,
it's tricky.
That's, yeah, it's
You know?
the whole taxability issue is so ridiculous, to be quite honest.
Yes.
It's just another level of complexity that, yeah, again, unless you're kind of that specialty seller, clothing or books, I wouldn't worry about it. But to be safe, if you're doing, like Kat said, if you're doing a smattering of different things, then it's worth kind of investing the time to make sure that you've got all the taxability right. We're actually working on a blog post right now that talks about the easiest way to assign individual taxability on kind of your inventory at large.
I just came up with, I just remembered my other question, and it's New Hampshire is a no sales tax state. Massachusetts is a sales tax state. They've been having wars for years over this. And at one point, I know that New Hampshire made it illegal for New Hampshire sellers to collect sales tax for other states. Say they're an FBA seller. They have FBA items in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is being very stringent about if you have that inventory there, you have Nexus. But New Hampshire doesn't let you collect sales tax from out of state for out of state. Which law do you follow?
Boy.
Oh my.
Your guess is as good as mine.
I
don't think I
know when there's
touch that one.
Because I know when there's a federal law, federal supersedes states. But when it's a state-to-state issue, that makes it interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I've actually heard that question before. And, I mean, that's a perfect example where I would probably talk to an attorney.
Yeah, we have border wars here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Border wars.
I'm
Which
from Boston
state do I?
originally, so I know that exact scenario very well.
Well,
Well,
if
see,
I was in,
I live.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I live in Dunstable, so I'm 5 minutes from New Hampshire, and all my stores
Okay.
are in New Hampshire.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if I was in border wars, I'd probably fall on the department of the state that I lived in.
Yeah, that's what my thought was. And but yeah, and in general, I mean, all these taxing things are very confusing. I used to laugh when people would go to Maine to go to the outlets to buy clothes that they're paying 7% sales tax on and driving all that gas money to save money.
Right.
It never made sense to me.
Right.
But I think that was all that I was thinking of. That was the big one. Is now the one thing with Marketplace Fairness Act, isn't that supposed to streamline all of this stuff? Isn't that what they're trying to do too?
Supposedly.
I know it's supposed. It's the government.
It absolutely does the opposite. So if you're that seller that is over that $1 million threshold in remote sales, it gets a lot worse. There's just I think the simplicity aspect is just a lot of talk. There's just no truth to that at this point.
Well, the Streamlined Tax Initiative was supposed to be that way too. Yes, Charlene's like me. We're both laughing. Streamlined. See, to me, if something in Congress comes up and it says the simplification, it means the opposite. If it says the Fairness Act, it's the opposite. I think they use a different language in Congress.
Yeah.
Fairness was the most brilliant term that they could ever assign to that.
Who wants to be unfair?
I mean, and my own personal belief is that, Amazon probably had a lot to do with that, but that was absolutely brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because Amazon knows it's coming, and since they sell to most states, they have Nexus, and that's why I think eBay and Amazon are at different sides of it, because eBay technically doesn't sell anything.
Yeah, so Amazon is a big driver behind this, and clearly when you look at the battles that they're fighting with each individual state that we talked about earlier to cut deals on tax collection, this wipes all that work that they would potentially have to do. It wipes it out. It's done. Their tax situation is settled. They can move on. They can build as many of these warehouses as they want. Mm-hmm. They can get to their goal, which is same-day shipping. Order by 10 a.m., get it at your door at 4 p.m. That's what they're trying to get to.
That's right. Drones and all.
Everybody else, drones and all. Everybody else like us is going to have to figure out, how to deal with that burden, and think what you want about what their motives are. But I mean, really, that's what they're trying to get to, and that's why this law would be really good for them.
Yeah, Ken said this is very complicated for a simple concept. It is, Ken, but it's not us that's complicating it. It's like the scenario that Karen just laid out. There are two states, and the laws of the two states, you cannot comply with both of them. So it's the
Right.
government that makes it complicated. It's companies like TaxJar that try to make it simpler, and people like Top Rates at our webinars try to provide information to try to make sure people understand.
Because it is very confusing, and there's a whole variety of different issues, and people hear the word sales tax, and they just think that that's a blanket thing. And there's Nexus, and there's remote sellers, and there's affiliates, and there's all of that other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
It's
well,
all
we are at an
craziness.
hour and a half, so I think we're done. And we
I
actually
got all
got
the
to all the
questions.
questions. Yay, I'm happy because I'm afraid we have too many this time. Again, if you had a question that didn't get answered, join us on our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/TRS webinars. The link's in the chat room. Make sure you're on our newsletter to hear about the next webinar that's coming up. And if you have a tax question, Mark at taxjar.com. Don't forget that TaxJar has a very active Facebook group that's all about sales tax. So if you have sales tax questions, if you still are shaking your head going, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do, join salestaxcommunity.com. Real easy to remember link. Salestaxcommunity.com goes to their Facebook group for TaxJar and sales tax on Amazon and eBay, and you'll get your questions answered there. Have a great day, and we will see you on the next webinar.